Hello, I'm Cindy Arenberg-Seltzer, President and CEO of the Children's Services Council of Broward County. Welcome to another one-hour special edition of Future First, Focus on Broward's Children. Recently, May was recognized nationally as Mental Health Awareness Month. Important as this topic should always be, it would likely have remained under the radar were it not for the horrific events that occurred at Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School and at too many other places which followed elsewhere in the country. Behavioral health, however, should not be issues of interest and concern only following catastrophic events. As a society, we recognize and treat the ailments of every other organ of our body, typically without a thought and without stigma. Why then, when the issue pertains to one of the most important parts of our physiology, the brain, does it become so complicated? Just as for any other ailment, there is help out there for the full gamut of mental health and behavioral disorders that at one point or another afflict most of us, if not all, and to which children and teens are often more susceptible. Today we'll discuss the role of behavioral health systems in serving and protecting individuals and communities and what challenges exist to increase their effectiveness. Joining me are Sylvia Quintano, CEO of the Broward Behavioral Health Coalition, Maria Hernandez, Chief Program Officer at the United Way of Broward County, Susan Nyamura, President and CEO of the South Florida Wellness Network, and Frank Izaza, Chief Operations Officer at 211 Broward. Welcome to all of you. Thank you for coming. I'm so glad we have an hour to discuss this topic because I'm sure even at the end of that we could talk for days. But let's start with, since I referenced the horrific events at Stoneman Douglas, that poses a lot of issues for us, both on the what happened, how did someone with mental illness wind up becoming a shooter, and is that normal, and what is the community doing now to recover? So I want to start with you, Sylvia, as the head of the Broward Behavioral Health Coalition, and talk about what is mental illness or behavioral health conditions, and do those necessarily lead to people being violent? I don't think so, but let me hear what you have to say.
The majority of individuals that experience a mental illness or a severely emotional disturbance, which is what happens with younger individuals. In other words, mental illness is usually a diagnosis that is given to people that move more into the adult category of the world. When children are younger, they usually have emotional disturbances. And if identified and treated timely, they can really recover and have a very successful, normal life. The key here is to educate folks, because I don't think a lot of people understand signs and symptoms of mental illness or signs and symptoms of emotional disturbances. And as a result, they don't follow up with professionals to address them or to identify them so that they don't become severe behaviors or severe issues and they become more aggravated as time goes by because it's untreated. It's like a toothache, right? You can have a first you have to prevent, right? So you do your cleanings and your flossing, right? And then you go and you do your checkups, and if you have a minor cavity, it's taken care of right away, and that's it, nothing happens. But if untreated, what happens? You end up losing your tooth or have a root canal. Well, mental illness is very similar. We may have signs and symptoms, we may experience events that are traumatic to us, and all of us have different resiliency factors and protective factors. I'm sure Maria will talk about that. And depending on that response, you will see that people either need some help and support in processing those events or processing their emotions on that issue, or not. Maybe they can resolve it within their families and their friends.
You know, it strikes me as you were just talking, that some people may be confused about the terminology mental health, behavioral health. What does that mean? Are they different? Are they the same? Why would the issues for young people be called behavioral health issues? Or even sometimes we use that with the adults as well. Would you like to answer, or anybody else want to explain that difference? Why behavioral health versus mental health?
So behavioral health encompasses both mental illness or substance abuse or severe emotional disturbances and substance abuse. So the behavioral health is more of a global encompassing terms for all of those behaviors. And then under that, you have special definitions of severely emotional disturbances or severe mental illness, or you have substance use, substance abuse, substance dependence. So there's other different types of categories under that. So the big umbrella is behavioral health issues.
And the reason for separate, I mean, I think that some people, when they think of mental illness, they think of schizophrenia,
Right.
bipolar.
Right.
I mean, there's some pretty significant
Right.
mental illnesses.
Right.
In children, though, that's often not what we're talking about when
Right.
you say
Exactly.
severe emotional disturbances.
Right, right. So we're looking at other signs and symptoms that occur in children that need to be identified.
Maria, did you want to add to that about what we're looking for in children when we're talking about the emotional disturbances?
With children, we see that the manifestation of mental health conditions, they happen at older ages when they become teenagers, and that's because of the transition and other hormonal factors and the medical conditions that happen. I have a teenager. When you have a teenager, sometimes you don't even know who you're meeting. Every day is a new individual. So imagine with those transitions and all the medical changes and the body changes that the children are experiencing at that time, that's where the mental health conditions seems to be kind of arising. And that's what we see mainly with kids. We do a lot of work in prevention and educating parents. And one of the reasons why we do it is because there's a huge disconnect between the brain and the body. And we usually, especially with children, we take them for every 6 months for checkup. And we asking the doctor, how is the child developing? Is everything where it needs to be? But we don't really ask about, anxiety, about is the child sleeping well? Is the child having any issues, any eating disorders? Is there anything happening in the house that's a little bit different than what you are used to seeing your child? So a lot of the work that we do, especially with children, is educating the parents to make the connection between the brain and the body, so that they can be attentive to what could be some of the signs that children may exhibit when they're going through a difficult emotional situation.
And usually that shows up as behaviors.
Exactly.
Which may be
Exactly.
in the school, it may be in the home. And so that's a great point. Susan, talk about the South Florida Wellness Network and how you're working on educating parents and families and your role.
Yeah, and behavioral health really means a lot to me because I'm a person in long-term recovery with both a substance use and a mental health diagnosis. So when you look at it, it's about inclusion. It's about including all people, recognizing that whether you have a mental health challenge or a substance use challenge, you're going to emanate a behavior that may not be acceptable to society. So it's really drawing down on what is a basis of that behavior. Is it coming from the emotional side, which is also categorized as a mental health component, or is it coming from the substance use side, or both? Because I happen to cross over both. So at the South Florida Wellness Network, we are all people with lived experience, which means we've crossed over both sectors or just one, whether it be substance use or mental health. So one of our biggest things is really recognizing the importance of inclusion. There's a lot of myths surrounding mental health challenges and substance use challenges, and it becomes into discriminatory practices because it's really lack of knowledge. It's almost like with me in politics. They're not my favorite, but it's because I don't know enough about them. So it's the same thing when you're working with individuals. And it's really a community that's in tremendous amount of pain. So when we look at it as how do we heal our community? And we stop looking at just specifically mental illness or substance use, and we look at the whole person, we can actually start healing as a community. So at South Florida Wellness Network, we have been birthed by the behavioral health community. Sylvia Quintana had a vision, and I was brought in, and we've been able to launch in a community of wholeness and wellness, and really looking at restoring the lives of individuals, because I know, and I'm living proof that recovery is possible. I do have children that I love very dearly that also pass over both sectors, and it's a challenge. It's truthfully a challenge, but it is an area of tremendous emotional pain. And it starts there. And, as to Maria and Sylvia's point, when we start recognizing as a community that these little behaviors that we may see in our children could be early warning signs, we don't know. So maybe we need to recognize how can we divert that, and how can we start looking at behavioral challenges as something a little bit different, and how do we get in and intervene? So the best place to do that is by educating families and educating our community that, hey, just like if you see a little mole there, you may want to have it checked occasionally. So if you see a little behavior, start looking into it, because it may be something more and it may not be. But just being aware of what it is. So at South Florida Wellness Network, we do a lot of education. We house the Federation of Families, which is the family voice. So a lot of families that have youth that cross over these areas with the serious emotional disturbances and, other types of issues that they may have. And we also have Youth Move, which is a young people that have been put into these various categories that may have had to speak to a therapist or a counselor or may have been on medication. So we're out there sharing the word that, mental illness is not this bad word and this thing to be feared. It is something to be aware of and to recognize that it does not discriminate, and at any given point it could happen to anyone. My son had his first psychotic episode at 23. I never would have thought that I would have had to fly across the country to get him out of a hotel room because he was so fearful. And 9 times out of 10, those individuals are more fearful of themselves and what could happen to them than what they're going to do to the community. So I'm here really from that perspective that people can and do recover, and it's just the tremendous pain that people are experiencing.
I really appreciate what you're saying about community and about awareness. I wish we could be a community of helpers, knowing what to look for, to know that your friend, your family member needs help, to know if your child's all of a sudden stopped using social media or stopped calling an important friend, just to know that maybe asking, is everything okay today?
Right.
And being willing to be a helper for our community is so important, because only as a community are we going to begin healing.
Right.
And I think we all need to take the responsibility of trying to help our family, our friends, and our neighbors and understand, is there something going on? How can I help? And is there something wrong? Because I want to be here to support you. Because as a community, that's how we're going to begin to heal.
Yeah, definitely. I just wanted to add to that, having the conversations in the home and focusing on emotional literacy, teaching our children that there will be days that they're going to be sad, there will be days that they're going to be emotional about some situations, but that, that they need to be able to manage those days, and they need to be able to deal with their emotions and be able to communicate to an adult how they're feeling. Emotional management is important. So they feel that they are too overwhelmed by something that's impacting them, that they can talk to someone else, and they can get the help that they need in order to be able to manage.
And help isn't always a scary thing. It doesn't
Right.
mean, I think a lot of people have a vision of, now you're going to lie on a psychiatrist's couch, and what do you want my child to do? And you want to label them, and you know, there's all kinds of images that pop up. But I think, Maria, your point, it's resiliency.
Exactly.
It's emotions happen. I defy you to find anybody in this world who doesn't have emotions, who has, the days of depression, days of anxiety, days of whatever is going on. But it's how we process it, how we manage it, and what we can do with it that really makes that difference.
A key in this process, which I think Maria touched upon, is the fact that we as adults need to be able to listen, and we need to be able to ask the right questions. And the questions need to be more about what happened today or what happened to you, because sometimes we ask questions that seem to be like, it's my fault. And a lot of the kids assume that if they say anything, their parents, their teachers, their whoever their adults that surround them are going to think, oh my God, it's my fault because I should have done something different, or I should have reacted different. And you know what? We're not born knowing everything that we're supposed to do. And somehow by the time kids go to school, they think that they're expected to know everything. And many times you have to tell them, no, you're supposed to be here to learn. So how can you know everything when you're going to school to learn, right? Or you're going to wherever you're going to. This is part of the learning process. And I think that the expectation is about, let's share what happened. Let's see how we can be supportive of each other so that if you don't know how to process something, you can talk to that adult and be able to either get opinions or get process through what your thoughts are, what your friends are doing, how to help folks around you that maybe don't have options and outlets. But that listening piece is crucial. It's crucial even for people that are at a desperate point where they're thinking of committing suicide, and that could go either way. Listening is what sometimes saves them from that. So I just want to emphasize the fact that all of us in our community, like you said, Frank, are responsible for ensuring that we are supportive of each other and that we learn the literacy, the emotional literacy that you talked about, we learn how to address each other so that we can really be supportive.
You just provided me with the perfect segue, because when it comes to listening, that's one of the great resources that 211 has available. And it should be used widely. So what I'd like to do is show a little video that they just prepared about the services that 211 has to offer and that listening ear and just how important it can be.
Thank you for calling 211 Broward. How can I help you today?
"211 Broward is an information and referral agency. We offer crisis intervention and empathetic and supportive listening." Oh, we have an array of services. For one thing, this is one place that you will find open 24 hours a day where you can call if you're in crisis or if you need someone just to listen to you. We have two ways of receiving a crisis call. One is through our 211 crisis helpline, where people, they'll hear about that. When they call in, we say if you are having thoughts of suicide, you can press this option. Another way we receive a suicide call is through Lifeline. Lifeline is a national suicide prevention program, and we're one of their affiliates here. So Lifeline will route a caller to our area based on the area code. And so we get those calls. And then any call really can turn into a suicide call if the counselor is listening well at the cues and picking up on those flags. We will ask those questions, Sometimes people are calling for rent and they're so overwhelmed and desperate that it becomes something else. She loves to give us little stickers, the pow and wow and all of that. You did a great job, because we need to hear that. We are the tool that's being used here, so it's our empathy. And after you take a couple of those calls, you can really feel the impact of it. So the little sticker kind of is a way of just reminding us we're doing good work. We're getting a lot of calls from parents in response to the shooting, and that is something that I want to encourage teens to take advantage of calling this line, because we want to support them through this. It's impacted all of us, some more than others, but this is our community and we care about them too. We want to do our part, and that's what we can do, so they don't have to feel like I've talked to this person too much. We're always here. And not all the counselors are as old as I am, so please call us and chat with us. Yeah.
That gave me chills just like it did the first time I saw it. Great job, Frank.
Thank you so much. And I just really appreciate Sylvia commenting about suicide. A lot of people in our community are going through a lot of pain. Our kids are going through a lot of pain. They need to know there's a resource out there that will give them hope when they feel hopeless. They could call us 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and we're there for the kids, we're there for the parents, we're there for the caregivers. We want to be able to provide our community hope during this very difficult time.
So through you, they can get linked to what?
All the resources that they need. If they need counseling, if they need to go attend a workshop to learn more about how to manage the trauma, if they need to go to therapy for family counseling, whatever type of service that they need, we'll be able to link them to those resources in the community. We have very specialized resources to make sure that the trauma resources that they need, they could get linked to.
And you also have the active listening for the suicide prevention, correct?
Right. It's very important that we know what it means to be a good listener. We know what it means to talk to someone in a way that they're going to feel safe, where they're going to feel respected, not judged, where they feel like they could actually go from feeling hopeless, thinking about suicide, to feeling like I can make it through this because there's someone there that cares about me.
For those who don't feel comfortable calling, can they text you?
They can't text us right now, but they could chat with us. So if they were to go to our website, 211-broward.org, they could chat with us online, and we could chat with the teen right there so that they feel comfortable talking to us. And they could do that on their phone. Just chat with us by visiting our website.
Because I find my 11-year-old, when it comes to talking, what'd you do? Stuff? How'd it go? Something? I don't know. But boy, she can type and chat all day. When it comes to the services and the trauma for recovery, Sylvia, I know you're a big funder. You're a huge part of that. Can you talk a little bit about what you've put in place and what we collectively have put in place for the trauma?
Sure. So right after the trauma, we requested funds to be able to provide post-trauma treatment services to individuals that were experiencing the event and symptoms. And even for people throughout the community that have been re-traumatized, which happens, right? There's a lot of other crises and violent events that have taken place in our community, in other neighborhoods, that once an event like this happens with the publicity that it took after the event, it's very common to begin to be re-experience maybe previous experiences that you've had. So the services are really available to everyone that has been affected one way or another as a result of this tragedy. We have trauma-trained clinicians that have been in evidence-based practices that have been trained 3 and 4 years prior to this event because we have recognized, as we all have mentioned here, that our community, because of the environment under which we live, have really experienced pain and trauma through other events. And the key to recovering our lives back is to really go through trauma treatment so that you can process your trauma and be able to move on. So those therapists are available. So we are providing free of charge trauma individual therapy to adults and to youth and students in our community. We have a flyer, and of course 211 is one of our providers that offer and connects people to the services, so that's available. We also have begun in this summer workshops that are workshop support groups for communities to learn more about what are the signs and symptoms of trauma, because sometimes we don't realize that people are saying through their behavior, I need help. And we kind of like dismiss this by saying, no, it's just this kid that is a teenager, big deal. And that is not true. We need to pay attention. That's why asking the question and paying attention to what symptoms are, trauma, post-traumatic signs of trauma is important. If unattended, it will really cause interruption with normal behaviors and your normal life. So we are really urging parents, teachers, and students that if they find themselves, for example, unable to concentrate in school, if they find themselves suddenly crying out of nowhere, saying, hey, I'm doing fine, and suddenly I feel like crying, what's wrong with me? It's not what's wrong with you. It's part of the way your body and your mind is processing the fear, the scare, the whole process of that event that took place. Sometimes, if not treated, people will not want to mix with other people. They isolate. And they don't want to, they avoid other people because they don't want to connect with other pain. Remember, if you're in pain and somebody else is in pain and you connect, the pain connects and it hurts more. So people try to avoid each other so that they don't have to connect with their own pain. And sometimes when you don't deal with that pain, which is important to deal with, people look for self-medication. And self-medication ends up using other kinds of drugs and so forth, and people then go through the wrong path. So maladaptive behaviors to deal with your pain. So it's not like it's a bad thing. It's like it's the best choice that I can make because I have no other choice. So what I'm saying to folks is we do have other choices. We have trauma treatment free of charge available. It's not a forever therapeutic intervention like lying on the couch forever. Various universities have mastered the way in which trauma is delivered so that individuals within a 16 to 26-week period have worked through their process. For people that are very severe, it may take a little longer, but it's not like a forever thing. This is part of preventive work. If you don't deal with it now, it can really cause later on a lot more disruption in your behavior. So we're trying to do our best to get that word out there, and thank you so much, Cindy, for letting us speak to it at this point in time.
Well, and I think it's important to note too, especially for the teens that are afraid of counseling, that there are some other evidence-based therapeutic interventions that are not as perhaps scary as an entree. So the work with the dogs, the work with equine therapy. You
The
can talk
drums.
to a
Yeah,
you
the
can
BPRs.
talk to a horse if that's more comfortable than talking to a therapist,
That's
or
right.
the drumming, or even yoga or the tapping.
The
We
tapping,
have
right.
coming back Lori Layden working on that evidence-based
Yeah, tapping.
for trauma. So there's a lot of things that don't necessarily involve that
Right.
deep, intense, let me reveal everything I'm feeling
right,
to
right,
you, which is so scary to people.
And other techniques could be art. People can express through their art, or even poetry. So people can write poetry or rap songs that reflect how they're feeling. So a lot of it has to do with how can you find your form, whatever that is, to be able to express yourself and be able to share it, so you have other ways of not holding back or holding in that pain or discomfort.
Maria, talk about some of the work that you're doing at the United Way with to bring healing back to the community.
So our focus is in prevention. We're looking at how to educate the community and educate parents about the signs and symptoms of possible behavioral health conditions. We're also looking at the prevention of substance abuse, because we know that that can be a coping mechanism for some of the families. And on a monthly basis, we are offering the mental health first aid training. And it's basically to teach the entire community about recognizing mental health symptoms and where to refer individuals that may show or exhibit any signs of having a mental health or behavioral health condition. So a lot of work around that area. Starting in July, we're going to be funding about 8 new providers that are going to be offering prevention services in the schools. The life skill training that has 2 components, one for the parents and one for the children. It's basically teaching parents, coping skills and teaching them and providing them with the tools that they need in order to address some of the challenges that they may face with their teenagers and with their small children. We also
Which
going to
grades are you doing that with?
we're doing that with 8 different providers in the
which
community.
school? Where?
In middle schools.
Middle
schools.
schools.
Yeah.
Ah,
in
yes,
middle
that's a real
schools,
turning
yeah.
point.
Middle school. We also are working with, because we talk a lot about the families and about the children, but we also taking a closer look at police officers and first responders.
Good.
Because we know that they also have gone through a trauma, and that they may need some type of support, and that they need to recognize when they need help. So we will be enhancing our CIT trainings to include more police officers and first responders in the training.
Yeah, until they're a tough group to get to.
Yes.
They do not want to admit that they need support.
Yeah. Yes. So we've been doing the CIT trainings on a monthly basis. We get about 45 police officers into our training, and they stay there for 5 days, which I think is
incredible.
very successful.
Wow.
So our intent is to be able to double the number of trainings that we are doing, because we have so many police officers reaching out to us and saying, we want to be part of this training. That right now, like I can tell you that our list for police officers that want to be enrolled in CIT training is completed all the way to August. We don't have any slot available.
So is that training for them to deal with their own trauma, or to understand how to deal when they come in contact with someone who's exhibiting
It's
behavior?
Both. It's both. So we have an entire day that we spend just on self-care.
Wow.
Yeah, so we're doing a lot of that. We also are going to continue doing classes on suicide prevention in the schools, and also training the teachers. Our teachers, they went to school to become educators, and they haven't had, extensive training on behavioral health. So we want to be the support that they need in providing them with the tools and the guidance, so that they know how to identify when there are issues in the schools and when one of their students is exhibiting some type of emotional condition.
We're also going to be doing the school board, CSC, and the Department of Health, the Florida Department of Health, collectively fund the school nurses or school health techs, and we're going to be training them over the summer also on the signs and symptoms, so that if they're seeing children come, regularly, that they have some idea of what to do.
Very good.
Yes, some of the work that we're going to do this time is, so you mentioned about listening, but sometimes we have to listen to the silent. And a lot of our teenagers, especially, they're not really talking. And it's training our parents and teachers to listen to the silent. What is happening? Why is this person or this child not really expressing what's going on? So going back to emotional literacy and helping them understand the teenagers' behavior, and for parents and the teachers to be equipped to listen to the silent.
That's very good.
And what I appreciate about this conversation is that we're talking about mental health. I think our community needs to hear that it's okay to talk about mental health.
Right.
This crosses all cultures. It does not discriminate.
Yeah.
It is okay to say that your child is depressed. It is okay to say that your child is going through pain. It is okay to say that my child is getting help.
Right.
It is okay. And our community does not, all people don't accept that mental health is stigma. It's not acceptable. We need to become more comfortable talking about mental health in our community so we could be helpers for anybody.
Right.
Yeah, that it's mental health, not mental illness.
Right.
We're wanting to stay healthy, as we said in the introduction, not just, our muscles, but
Our
this muscle.
And we always say, when you say mental illness, and if you make it about we, the community, it becomes mental wellness. So we're no longer in that state of everything's illness. We become well as a community. And, I appreciate you saying that, because I think the conversation needs not to be taboo, but it needs to be a regular conversation that we have on a continuous basis, and throughout everywhere that we go, you have conversation with people, because some people is in some sort of pain, and usually it has to do with their emotions and their well-being. And when you engage in that conversation, 9 times out of 10, you find that there are more underdiagnosed individuals than we realize. And the more we talk about it, the more access to care that people have, and the less shame that there is surrounding, when somebody's going through something.
I think you see a lot of that right now. There's a
Yes.
lot of free-floating anxiety and anger.
Right.
Like,
Yes.
people are just so angry.
Yes.
Interesting levels of extraordinary compassion and extraordinary anger over things that might not otherwise.
We call it a fear-based reaction to things, because we don't know what to do. And it's fearful. My daughter's going into middle school this year, and she's so afraid. She's terrified, because it's that fear of what's going to happen to me there, and to have those conversations now at the dinner table, like, yeah, you're right, but it could happen anywhere, and that's the thing, is it doesn't just happen, it could happen anywhere. And I think it's just more in our face, and it's out loud, and we just need to continue to have that conversation. And listening is huge, and having those conversations, but also preparing families, because it's so difficult nowadays, because parents have to work,
Right.
and they work really long hours, and there's a lot of kids that are left unattended. And until we start having that conversation about a community, that if I see my neighbor's child, in some kind of distress, what am I going to do as that community member to help support and not shame, the child or the family? And I think that's where it really comes to, like, what do we do, and what is our social responsibility?
Interesting, the concern about intruding, too, I think,
Yeah.
is there. But often, teenagers will more likely talk to somebody else than they will to their own parent.
Yeah.
That may be where 211 can be, may have more success talking to a child than their parent can.
And it's a safe place because it's a confidential, it's anonymous, it's a free service. They could call 24 hours a day, chat with us. We really want to make sure that they feel safe talking to us. And I really appreciate what you're saying along the lines of, can we start helping our community feel safer? It's so scary to think that a child is scared to go to school. And to be able to talk to the child about that pain and make them feel safe again. We really need to help our community feel safe again right now.
Right.
Yeah. I've quoted Christine Hunchevsky, mayor of Parkland, a lot, as she said to me, we weren't as safe as we thought we were before, but we're not in as much danger now as we think we are. And
Very
that's
good.
really stuck with me.
Yeah, it's true. Well, the thing is that you don't know what you don't know.
Right.
And part of it, and it goes back to early identification and emotional literacy. If people see things and they can't see them, it's like things are happening in front of you, but you don't see it because you dismiss it. That's the biggest issue that we have. If we want to create a safety community, so we have to really pay attention and identify concerns that we have and deal with them and say, hey, look, let's talk, or let's get you somewhere that you can talk, or and so that early identification is what's going to help us keep everybody safer.
And again, people with mental illness are not necessarily violent.
No, they're not. No,
Only, I believe the statistic is 5%
it's
of
a
the.
very small amount. And I can tell you that the same way people have chosen to adapt their pain to, I'm going to self-hurt and commit suicide, and not commit, and choose to death by suicide because they want to get rid of the pain. I mean, when someone gets to that point, can you imagine the years of pain that they have endured? Because that decision comes at that point. And that can flip and say, no, I don't want to deal with the pain. I'm going to blame people for my pain. So it's a matter of how that person thinks. So that's why I'm saying listening and paying attention is so important, because someone can change and address your pain somehow so you can process it. And that may turn away, it turns the set of events that could happen after that by listening and paying attention.
And Sylvia, I think it's important to say that there's people that think there is no warning signs,
Yeah.
but most often than
There
not,
is.
there are warning signs.
They are.
There
You're
are
right.
warning
You know,
signs.
that all of a sudden the child doesn't want to go out and play as much, or they're now really irritable with you, or they're now starting to have problems at school and they never had problems at school before. There's most often than not a warning sign that someone is going through pain. We want
Nightmares.
people to know we're going through pain because we want help.
Right, and so you have issues of nightmares. People are having bad dreams over and over again. It's not just one. You have one nightmare, okay, you talk to your parents, oh, I had this horrible dream last night. But if you continue to have nightmares every day, your body is telling you something that is not well, that you need to address. And so I think that you're right. There's a lot of signs and symptoms that we dismiss, and education and being aware is kind of like our best friend in this process of recovery.
Susan, what do you hear from the teens in that side of the Wellness Network?
We hear a lot of different things from the young people. It's really interesting because they talk about the simple fact that they don't feel heard a lot of times. And that's one of the biggest components that they talk about. And that's why we kind of create a safe place and they all kind of have that conversation. And not only that, when they do have conversation, they're fearful of what happens next. Because we are so fear-based, instead of getting into the emotion and having a connection with somebody, we're quick to want to pass them off into, maybe the medical model or the therapeutic model, when that may not be the case. Right now, it's just a thought that they have felt or a feeling that they felt, and then they've articulated it. And because they've shared it, now it becomes this scary thing. So a lot of them hold it because they don't want to be put into that category. Well, I'm not crazy, and you think I'm this, and all of these things, they get put in this bucket. And they're those kids, and it becomes a very harmful thing and a very threatening thing to, young people. When we humanize things and we watch language and we, anxiety is a big word, but when we talk about, when we identify it more like nervousness or kind of uneasy feelings, and we talk about it from that perspective, they'll engage in a conversation a lot quicker. Because when you say anxiety, they automatically think, okay, here comes medication, here comes the therapy, and all of those things. When we start humanizing it and making it very, let's just have a conversation, Frank. You know, how you feeling today? What's your mood like? You know, instead of, you know, telling them to chill, or, you know, ask them how their mood is. You know, what's going on? You know, what's the topic of the day? You know, and when you have those conversations, you know, they get real, and, you know, they want to talk to you about their problems. I've heard a lot of really horrific things that kids are experiencing out there on the street, you know, and, you know, not recognizing, you know, we talk about trauma and the adverse childhood experiences and what that's like if they go home every night and they don't have food, you know, or they don't have two parents in the household, and really looking at the impact of how that affects our children and their day-to-day functioning, and why children get upset and angry and act out in these outbursts and emotions because they're in so much pain. And we hear a lot of that because it just so happens the youth that we work with a lot and bring in, they don't have to have a diagnosis. Our mission statement is people who are experiencing behavioral health challenges are those that are at risk, and we're all at risk. You know, so it makes it inclusive of everyone, and we get a lot of real conversation, and we see a lot of real healing that takes place because these kids are feeling heard. And that's where we have a program that's called Face the Music, and the kids do a lot of rapping and a lot of their spoken word and a lot of the art that we do with the young people, and Beat the Odds and dancing mindfulness. So we're addressing trauma and emotions, but from a holistic perspective. We're working with them from mind, body, you know, treating the entire person as a human being and loving them a little bit, you know. Love goes a long way.
Never have too much love.
I know.
You know, some of the real stories that I was hearing from the teens that were actually at the event is just that pain of feeling so guilty that they lost their friends and that they're still living.
Yes.
That's been one of the deepest emotional pains that they've been going through. And I just want to say, you don't have to feel guilty. It was not your fault. And I think that's really important to hear, that the teens, that guilt, please talk to us about that, because it was not your fault.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was one person at fault for what happened. I mean, there may have been mistakes along the way. There are certainly places where we don't know the full extent to which, I won't say his name, did not get the help he needed or refused the help that was offered to him towards the end. But in the end, when that happened, there was nothing that those other children could have done to save their friends. And the fact that they're carrying that is, in a sense, not surprising, but also just finding a way to let them release that, to reorient the brain is so important. I'm glad you brought that up, Frank. So we have to, and I think a lot of adults as well.
Right.
I mean, it's the young people and it's the parents who wonder.
And the
or
teachers,
teachers.
because the teachers are the protectors in the school. Technically, they're teaching class, kids are safe there, and they couldn't do anything either. So it's like very painful also for the teachers, and the guilt and what could I have done. And there's a lot of that thinking going on, you know, about what do we do? How do we protect the kids? How do we protect ourselves? That conversation needs to happen. People need to continue to talk about it so that they can process how to protect yourself. It's like protective factors. How do you build protective factors?
Right. And yeah, keep processing together. And that's, I'm so glad that we have this opportunity today to keep processing. Obviously, we're all still processing too.
Yeah. We are too. For sure.
You know,
Yeah.
as the CEO of the organization that's designed to oversee, provide the leadership, advocacy, and resources to help children grow into healthy, productive adults. You know, I torture myself regularly on how is it that he wasn't caught? What was it that was missing? And how can we support our children and make sure that they know how loved and supported that they are, and there's a place to turn. Please turn to 211 and then get connected. So for all of those programs that you were all involved with, and of course CSCs as well, through 211 is the way to get there.
Sure.
And so we're coming close to the end of our hour, but I'd like to give you a chance for some final thoughts. Sylvia?
So for me is parents, be vigilant and aware of your kids' behaviors and things that they say to you, and make sure that you access help whenever they need it, whether it is through support groups or arts or alternative types of ways of processing things, or whether people need therapy. I think it's very important to address these issues so that your children can move on and live productive lives. Don't let this incident interfere with their potential. So that's my message to the parents.
And I just want to add, I hope they heard you in the spirit in which you just said that you were not saying that you want them to move on today. That was not your message.
No.
Because I hear that sometimes from the kids, that people are just telling us, oh, you have to move on. No. We are not saying move
No.
on today.
No. Access what you need so that you can process and live your life.
Right? Beautiful. Maria?
I think as a community, we all play an important role in helping minimize reduce the stigma around behavioral health. We need to reduce the stigma around behavioral health, especially, we minorities communities. They don't want to look for help. They don't want to seek for help. They're afraid because there's so much stigma around it. And as a community, we all have a responsibility to do more work and more education so that people will be more open to share about their feelings, and everybody will become more attuned with their emotions and what needs to happen to help them cope with daily life.
So true.
Yeah.
Susan?
I'm going to piggyback right behind Sylvia and Maria. Because I think as a community, I think we all have a social responsibility, but also to the parents and to the children and to the first responders, the teachers, be kind to yourself. This is a healing process and there's no time limit on grief. There's not an expectation that we've got to bounce back. As a community, when we work together, we heal together. And I think utilizing resources like 211 and all of the other great providers out there and really recognizing that, we're in this together. And, we can hopefully, by coming together and talking more about mental health, behavioral health challenges, we can reduce and eliminate, some of the discrepancies that there are with relation to mental health. But education is really, really powerful. And to take, the opportunities that are provided with mental health first aid, through the United Way, we're mental health first aid trainers as well, and just really to educate our community that we're all in this together.
Beautifully said. Frank?
I think it's important that we just become a community of helpers, willing to support each other and help each other, making sure that we're willing to listen and then help connect people to resources. You could simply tell someone, call 211 today, and they're going to help you link with all the supportive services that you need. If I can't help you, I want to make sure I link you with the right people to get the help. And our community is full of support right now. There's many support systems, and I just want to make sure that anyone that's feeling hopeless, you could call 211, and we're going to be there for you to help you get that hope that you need.
Wow. Well, we certainly have a room full of helpers and listeners here today. I feel all warm and fuzzy. A little sad, a little daunted, but also hopeful, because the four of you and all of the hundreds, if not thousands of people behind you that are working in this field are really there, available to help and support, and helping each other through this is really important. And as you pointed out, the challenges of every day. The Stoneman Douglas event was a big, violent, focusing tragedy, but we have on a daily basis challenges that are happening violence that's going on in our community, cruelty, violence, homelessness, foster care, there's plenty of trauma to go around.
Yeah.
Identifying and treating those who need help before they can cause harm to themselves or others by adequately supporting and destigmatizing behavioral health supports are all part of the solution. I want to thank Sylvia Quintana, Maria Hernandez, Susan Nyamura, and Frank Izaza for sharing important information on the existing resources and the need to continue to improve and destigmatize behavioral health and to promote those services. I've been your host, Cindy Arenberg-Seltzer. For this or any other episode of Future First, Focus on Broward's Children, go to our website, www.cscbroward.org, where you can access our YouTube channel, like us on Facebook, and remember to join us next time on Future First, Focus on Broward's Children.